Good morning! You are a ceramic mug that has just gone through your first bisque firing. That means that the water molecules have been burnt out of you, but you're not ready to hold liquids yet. We're unloading you and all of your batch buddies for some glazing. There's a lot more to making pottery than just throwing and sculpting. So come along for the journey after the kiln. After emptying the kiln, the first step is to sort all the bisque. I put them in categories by what glaze color I'm going to use. The next step is to wash off any possible dust. This makes sure that the glaze adheres as best as it can. Over the years, I've used a few different techniques for washing bisqueware. I used to use a sponge, but I found that the rough texture of the clay would break off pieces of the sponge and leave little sponge flakes, which then would disrupt the glaze application. So next I tried a washcloth, but even the fibers of that would shred over time onto the clay. Right now I've settled on a microfiber cloth, which seems to shed the least out of all of these options. Before I start glazing, I paint some black underglaze into each of my logos on the bottom of my mugs. I like imprinting my logo into the mugs because it gives it a more permanent feel, but for anything that I can't support the bottom of while pressing in a stamp, I'll just bisque flat and then use an underglaze rubber stamp to put the logo on after glazing. Finally comes glazing, which I find to be a very tedious task. It's one of my least favorite steps across the ceramics process. You'll see me making sure that I thoroughly mix the glaze, and then I use a dipping technique, whereas some artists paint on their glazes. Each have their own pros and cons, but because I already don't like glazing, I want it to go as quickly as possible. Most pieces get at least 2 layers of different glazes, but some can even get up to 3. I don't like to wax the bottom of my mugs, so I have to sponge off any extra glaze on the bottom. One, to give it a clean look, but also because any remaining glaze will get stuck to the kiln shelf and just create a big mess. There are 2 reasons that I don't like using wax. One is because I just was never very accurate at the application, and once wax goes on, you have to either sand it off or burn it off to fix any mistakes. Another reason I don't like wax is because when it burns off in your kiln, it does add to a quicker wear and tear on your elements. Once all the glaze is dried and cleaned up, it's time to reload the kiln for a second firing. When you're loading glaze pieces, you have to make sure that nothing is touching because the glaze will fuse everything together like glue. You might see me checking the height of my stilts to make sure I'm giving every piece enough clearance. If not, I'll usually add another 1/2 inch stilt before putting on a shelf. You don't want any pieces too close to your thermocouple because it might make the reading inaccurate. So you'll see that I'm only stacking some smaller pieces to not obstruct the thermocouple. All right, let's fire this and see how it turns out. Hello again. Did you enjoy your time in the kiln at over 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit? You might think you're finished, but there's still more work to be done before you can go to your new home. Let's get started. Once we get the glaze kiln emptied, it's time for the finishing steps. That starts with sanding the bottoms of all the mugs. I use 2 different grits of diamond core sandpaper. First a rougher one to level out the feet of my mugs, and then I'll move on to a finer grade to really get that smooth feel that won't rough up your table. I only added sanding to my repertoire a few years ago after listening to the Mud Peddlers podcast and hearing their arguments for why it's so important. I didn't really think it mattered before, but now that I do it, I see the huge difference in quality. Sanding the bottoms just really upscales your pottery. The next step in getting my pieces ready to sell is to measure their capacity. I started implementing this practice really early on in my business because I was so tired of answering the question of how much does this fit at every show. Some pieces have even more additional steps, like matching a cork to my drinking bottles, my most popular item at the Renaissance Fair. If I'm taking a piece to a show, I'll have to put a price tag on it. But if I'm going to sell it online, the next step is to photograph. Eventually, I'll have to edit those photos and make a listing, market the pottery, and then when it sells, it goes through its final step, shipping. It's hard to say whether selling pottery online or selling pottery at a show is more work. Shows require a lot of time of packing up bins to transport the pottery, spending time manning your table or booth at a festival, but you are selling many more items all at once, and you're packing things in shopping bags instead of boxes. So that might even out with the time spent photographing, listing, marketing. Who's to say? Well, I hope you enjoyed that little journey in what happens after the kiln. I feel like a lot of pottery content focuses on the throwing or the sculpting aspects and not so much on the finishing. So I just wanted to give a little look into the other side of the pottery process. If you're not a potter yourself, I hope you found this interesting. If you are a potter, I'm curious if I do anything differently than you, the same as you. I said that I hate glazing, and I feel like glazing is a very polarizing topic. You either love it or you hate it. So let me know which side you are on. And if you do love glazing, then what is your least favorite part of the pottery process? March and April really flew by. I was pretty heads down in the studio, and at the end of April, I just did a double show weekend. I think I'll talk about that soon. I've had a video in mind about all of my most memorable customers. If you're a potter or a different sort of art small business owner, feel free to tell me some of your customer stories and maybe I'll include them in my video too. That could be fun. If you did enjoy this video, give it a like, and of course make sure to subscribe if you want to keep up to date on how I'm doing hitting those inventory goals for this year. I'll talk to you soon. Bye!